Hi, and welcome to our film Swedish tax regulations for non-Swedish construction companies, establishment and corporate income tax. My name is Jenny.
And my name is Maria. Today we're going to talk about your options for establishment when setting up business operations in Sweden. You can choose between registration of a branch at the Swedish company's registration office or registration of your non-Swedish business with the Swedish tax agency.
Yes, and we will also talk about corporate income tax and the concept of permanent establishment. So let us start with our options for establishment. Your first option is to register a branch in Sweden. You do so at the Swedish company's registration office, Bolagsverket in Swedish. Then the company will receive a corporate identity number. Next, you register for tax with the Swedish tax agency. If you already have a current registration in Sweden, you also have to send in a notification of changes regarding your old corporate identity number. The reason is that your company cannot have two Swedish corporate identity numbers. Maria, can you tell us about the other option for registration?
Yes, of course. If you decide to register your non-Swedish business, you apply directly to the Swedish tax agency for business registration and a corporate identity number. You can apply via our e-service, Registration of Foreign Companies in Sweden, which is available on our website skatteverket.se. In the e-service, you will be asked to state whether you are a sole trader or represent a legal entity such as a limited company. It's important to select the right type of applicant since this determines which information this e-service will request. You will also be asked to submit certain documentation such as copy of your passport or ID card if you're a sole trader, and an extract from a company register in your home country if you represent a legal entity. An electronic ID is not required in order to use the e-service. Please note that the definition of a legal entity in your country of establishment might differ from the definition according to Swedish law. If it is not a legal entity according to Swedish law, each partner must apply as a sole trader. We would like to point out that the tax registration is confidential. This means that the Swedish tax agency is only allowed to communicate with you as the applicant or with a representative who has a power of attorney. The Swedish tax agency will not communicate with you by email. Instead, we will phone you or write to you by post. However, you are welcome to get in touch with us by the method you prefer. Now you know how to register your company in Sweden. What's next, Jenny?
Well, let's talk about corporate income tax, but in order to do that, we have to start by explaining the concept of a permanent establishment. Because permanent establishment is an essential term that needs to be explained before we can move on. And this applies regardless of your choice of establishment, if it is a registration of a branch or of your non-Swedish business. There are three criteria for a permanent establishment. Firstly, there must be a fixed place of business. Secondly, the place of business must have a certain degree of permanence. And thirdly, the business must be entirely or partly run from this location. Swedish tax convention often include a special provision that apply to construction projects. A non-Swedish company's construction project in Sweden must run for a certain period of time in order to be considered a permanent establishment. The time period varies for different tax convention, but it is commonly either 6 months or 12 months. These rules are important when assessing whether or not a non-Swedish construction company should pay income tax in Sweden. And how about corporate income tax, Maria?
Well, if you operate a business from a permanent establishment in Sweden, or if you own a property in Sweden, you must file income tax returns in Sweden. You have to pay corporate income tax on income from your permanent establishment here in Sweden. You pay corporate income tax in advance on a monthly basis. The idea is for your company to avoid a large tax bill at the end of the year. You estimate your business annual income in a preliminary income tax return. Then the Swedish tax agency will calculate your preliminary tax and let you know how much you are due to pay each month. You have to file a preliminary income tax return if you start business activities in Sweden and apply for F-tax approval if changes take place that will affect your income or you close down your business. But Jenny, what is the deadline for filing an income tax return?
Well, it depends whether you're a sole trader or represent a legal entity. If you're a sole trader, the deadline is always the 2nd of May. If you are a legal entity, your income tax return must be filed by a specified date in the year that follows the end of the financial year. The Swedish tax agency then calculates the final tax due to be paid or refunded on the basis of the information provided in this return and your preliminary income tax return. But Maria, what are my obligations if I don't have a permanent establishment?
Then you're obliged to submit specific information regarding your business activities in Sweden. But this only applies if you have F-tax approval, are required to deduct preliminary tax from compensation for work, or are required to provide the equipment necessary to keep an electronic staff register on a construction site. You have to submit this information once a year, and the deadlines are the same as for the income tax return. Please note that you must make your own assessment as to whether you are required to file an income tax return or submit specific information. Now I've mentioned a new term, electronic staff register. Can you please explain that, Jenny?
Yes, I can. All companies that carry out construction activities must have an electronic staff register. And this register documents all the people working at the construction site each day and the times when the workers start and end their shifts. You must enter these details every day. If the electronic staff register is missing or incorrect, you have to pay a penalty fee. This was our last picture, Maria. Can you summarize what we have talked about?
Yes, of course. To sum up this information, we have talked about your two registration options, what a permanent establishment is, and what its impact on corporate income tax. And finally, the specific information that some companies need to submit.
Mm. And we hope you have found our presentation helpful, and we recommend that you watch our other films to learn more about Swedish tax regulations for non-Swedish construction companies. But Maria, how do our viewers get in touch with us if they have questions?
Well, you can find most information on our website skatteverket.se, but you can also call our tax information service. The phone number is on our website, and you can ask all your questions in English.
That's right. And with that, Maria and I would like to thank you very much for your attention. So bye bye.
Bye bye.